Hi everyone, my name is Hillary Barnard and I'm going to talk through an assessment of the Executive Team Leader Training Program at Target. This first slide just shows the homepage of the training website that we have, Learn at Target. So this is a website any team member, manager, anybody can access, and it gives you all the different training information. As you can see, job training, continuous learning, career development, and on the right here is leadership development. So each of these categories drops down and gives you any information or access to different trainings that you might need throughout your time with Target. So obviously, as I said, I'm going to talk through the Executive Team Leader Training Program and would be under the Leadership Development tab. That tab gives you all of the trainings, all of the learning plans, all of the guides that an executive team leader would need in order to progress through their training. This next slide gives an introduction to the Leadership Development Program. Most specifically, and why I added it to this presentation, is it does give the mission statement. To drive growth, we accelerate the development of target talent through meaningful experiences and connections that build leadership skills and behavior. As I move to the next slide, this shows my assessment of the mission statement as far as the program that I'm assessing. So I've decided that the mission statement that Target provides for their executive training program is in the developing stage. So the mission statement is short and encompasses any training experience that's provided. It's not very specific, and it doesn't give any specific goals yet into what you should experience from the training. What I do think is good about the mission statement is it does seem to align with Target's overall mission, and that helps new trainees to understand where they'll be going from the long term and doesn't necessarily have to be specific to the work center that they're training for or the specific management position they're training for. It's something that's, again, all-encompassing, so they'll understand that no matter what I do within Target as a new employee, this is going to be my training experience. Next, I move into program goals. So I identified in the program assessment planning rubric that the program goals outlined for Target's executive training experience is in the developing stage. I wasn't able to find in my research any overarching specific critical goals for the training period for newly hired managers. There are weekly checkpoints, which I will share shortly throughout this presentation, that are completed, that they do outline what they hope to achieve, but it's not outlined at the beginning of the course as all-encompassing, so you don't know exactly each week what you're going to get yet, or you don't necessarily know by week 6, which is a 6-week training period, what you'll be able to accomplish at the end. The assumption would be you can do your job, but if they're not outlining specific goals throughout each point of training, it does make it potentially a little bit more difficult for the trainee to understand where they're headed during their training. The next slide is from the week 1 checkpoint. So there are 4 checkpoints throughout your training. You complete one in week 1, week 2, week 4, and week 6. So this is just a small cutout example of what you talk through with your trainee and with your store manager that you're working with or training in their particular store. So as you can see at the top, it explains what you should have learned from the previous week. And then below, it says, can you explain how Target's mission is carried out in the stores? And within your work center, it does say at the bottom. So it gives you an opportunity as the trainee to say, this is what I understand, and it gives your trainer the opportunity to say, this is what I think you need to continue to work on. This is a good example of how Target has outlined some learning objectives throughout the training and allows the student or trainee to self-assess how they're doing and the progress they're making, and also allows the trainer to give them feedback along the way. The next slide, I move to the student learning outcomes and how that lies within the planning rubric, and I've decided that Target lies in the developing assessment of student learning outcomes. So they're not specifically outlined at the beginning of the course, like I previously said, but they are outlined in the checkpoints that I just shared. Additionally, throughout each trainee's time with Target's training program, there are specific classroom trainings, and those trainings do identify specific learning outcomes that you should get from those trainings that in the turn would be applied to the role that you're taking on as you complete your training. For example, one of them is at the beginning, so you have a kind of a welcome to Target training that's about 4 hours, and the learning outcome of that training includes the ability to describe Target's training and guest-centric culture, identify expectations of a new team member, and describe your role as an ETL. So these are a little bit vague, but this is kind of one of the only places I see very specific learning outcomes when it comes to classroom trainings versus that on-the-job training, which is honestly one of the more important parts of the entire training experience. So that's kind of why I came to the developing, where I feel that Target has kind of figured that out from a classroom training perspective, but how can we apply that to an on-the-job training experience? So the next slide shows the data source assessment opportunities in the planning rubric. So I've decided that Target falls into that beginning category when it comes to assessment measures. So as I already discussed, there are a few different training checkpoints that the trainees will go through that I do think are beneficial, but I don't know that we're gaining enough as the trainers information to get that data that we need to improve training and to improve the experiences and how we can make sure that students, trainees, are getting everything that they need from courses, and how do we really assess if we're not given, the points of assessment and the points that we need to figure out if you're not at a certain place that you should be expected to be at a certain part of the course or part of your training experience. There is something that from an assessment standpoint, that I do think is cool, that kind of falls into this that I wanted to share. Is that at the end of your training, you are, as a trainee, you're given the opportunity to fill out, and I included a picture here of a assessment of your own training. So I do think that that's potentially very beneficial. Where this information goes, honestly, I wasn't able to figure out through the resources that I had, but I can only assume this reaches the headquarters level training department, and they use this information to adapt trainings and figure out what works best for students or trainees. So the next slide talks about methods and measures. So I've put Target into the category from the rubric around developing. So again, I was unable to find any specifics around what is actually measured from a headquarters standpoint when it comes to influencing any training experiences. I know that there are different things that are assessed at the store level and different trainees, and they're able to give that feedback, but collecting all of that data on a big picture basis, I haven't been able to find any information. I said it's developing because I do feel like, again, at the store level, we've been able to influence some of the methods and be able to measure this person is doing this well, or this is what they need to work on. But I don't believe that I don't know currently at the headquarters level what that type of assessment is. The next slides are on benchmarks and standards. So again, put into the developing category. So in the past 10 years that I've been with Target, and I'm currently a district training sponsor, so I've been very involved for the past 6 in our training experiences within our district. I haven't seen a ton of change when it comes to what is going on within the training program. So I've seen maybe 2 or 3 changes to different things, which makes me think that there are definitely more opportunities to get some information to different partners that do influence that change and are able to support that throughout the program. So the next category, timeline. So again, put into the developing category. As I just said, at the district level, the biggest impact that we're able to have is that people element. So we're able to do assessments on, are the people who are training the right people? Are they teaching correctly? Are they giving people the best experience when they onboard to Target as possible? So there's usually like quarterly talent meetings where we sit down, a handful of our district manager, human resource business partner, and a handful of store managers, and discuss that exact thing. Where are the people on our stores the right ones to be training? Are we putting new trainees in the right training experiences? Again, that's kind of at the district level, and that's really the only place we're able to truly impact any change when it comes to training. There's always going to be required trainings and legal trainings and different things that have to happen, and that's really where the movement is a little bit slower and the timeline is way slower. At least it feels at the store level, just because I don't have the knowledge or experience from a headquarters perspective. So the next category from the planning rubric is the data analysis and key findings. So again, kind of reiterating what I just said, but the ability to kind of have an impact on overall district training is kind of at that people element again. So we're not able to create new trainings or really have much adjustment to the program other than what we can control, which is, again, as I just said, who's training, where are they training, are they getting the best experience possible? Finally, the use. So we're into the last category, results, action items. As I've discussed, there are quarterly talent and training discussions had between the district manager, human resources, business partner, and store managers. So the conversations are beneficial and does help to improve the training at a district level, but there's still required trainings that are outdated, in my opinion. I don't think there's enough assessment from a headquarters perspective, and I don't think there's enough change or real-time change, at least that we feel trickles down to that store level. So I would be really interested to be able to see from a district or corporate perspective, headquarters perspective, what are they doing with this information? We fill out the checkpoints and send them in. We fill out different assessments and send them in. And how is that changing our experience as it trickles down to us, and how does it impact us directly? I, in the future, would love to be part of that development of different trainings and hope that we see more progression in that in the future, because I feel like it is so important to invest our time in new trainees and make sure that we're taking assessment and data information and applying that in the future.